Well, hello everyone, Ivana Taylor here. I'm your host of Bizapalooza Chat. Today's Monday Plugged In edition. I am so excited because the theme we've been dealing with for quite a while is just what is that one small thing you can do to improve your business. A week or so ago, we talked about 10x ways to grow your business. But today, I've got my friend and super business expert star from Fox News. Hello, Susan.
Hello, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
I am so excited that you're here because you speak about something that's very, very near and dear to my heart. Your latest book is coming out in January, and it's called The 1% Edge.
That's correct.
Talk a little bit about what triggered you to write about the 1% Edge. Kind of what have you done since the last time you had out a book?
I've always really focused just on smaller organizations, small businesses. And I started out, it was sort of this evolution. I started out talking about just a noticeable difference, that the businesses that excel versus those who flounder or fail are the ones who come to the marketplace with just a noticeable difference. It doesn't mean that you've got to, come out with this new, cool, sexy product or service, just enough different that the marketplace can't get what you have anywhere else. So, and as I was writing more of that and studying more of that, I started watching what was happening in larger organizations and how so many of the brands that we've loved over the years, you think Blockbuster and Linens and things and Circuit City, that have gone to the wayside, and they were like top of their game. And I started focusing a lot on that and reading and researching and delving into it. And I realized that what happens is we get married, and this is any size organization, married to the current way we do business, married to our current products and services, married to our current team, married to our customers, and pretty soon something happens and boom, we're blindsided. And what we do then is we run around, and I say it's like throwing spaghetti against the wall. Oh my gosh, let's try this, let's try that. We got to get out of this, and fewer than 10% of organizations that find themselves in that situation actually succeed. So I created a process. It's nothing really magical about it. It's not rocket science, but I created a process. It's 6 steps. And what it does is it helps organizations build innovation into their DNA, not just with the product or service, but with every single aspect of their business so that they can remain relevant, that they don't get blindsided, and that they can sustain their ongoing success.
That's awesome. And so what have you noticed about when businesses do make small changes? Because I know big changes can seem scary.
Right. Well, I think that what happens with big changes, it's so abrupt, and you got to try to get everybody on board, and people get confused. And sometimes they're so big that, let's say you've got marketing and sales and your product people on board, but finance and your technology and your processes aren't able to support it. Well, that's probably going to fail in most senses. But if you're constantly innovating, if you're constantly tweaking every aspect of your business, looking for better and better ways to manage the people that you have on your team, the way you deliver your product, the way you service your customers, then those things are constantly evolving, and you're always got that momentum going in the direction that you should. The other great thing is it gives you the flexibility and agility to step back and analyze in real time, not historical data. That's yesterday's news, seriously, no pun intended. Real-time analysis. Is it working? Isn't it? Well, if it's not working, should we tweak it now? Should we stay the course? Or, hey, do we abandon this and look for that next great opportunity and move forward? But it's that constant perpetual forward movement.
So you have to explain something to me because you gave me some advice, and I don't know what we were doing, or maybe you were just talking to me. I can't remember, but it was years ago. And you said something that I'm telling you has gone with me from that day. I think this was back when you lived in Missouri. So it was something like, you have to build the business that you want to have.
Yes.
Remember saying something like that?
I did. I always said, when you start a business, or let's say you were launching a new product area or whatever, you need to have your end game in mind. So you want to make sure that You know what it is. What do I envision this to be? Do I want it to be a franchised organization? Do I want it? Do I want to have thousands of employees all over the world? Do I want to, be in multiple locations, or do I want this to be a virtual business? And how are you going to build value, and how are you going to scale that organization? It's just like you wouldn't go out and start to build a house and say, well, you know what? Let's dig a little foundation here and start putting some bricks over here. And, let's use some siding over here. And, you know what? I forgot we really wanted this to be 2 stories, because you're going to have a hodgepodge of a mess on your hands. And I think the other thing that smaller organizations do when they get to the point where they want to sell and retire or pass it on to another generation, if they have built something that is this hodgepodge, or where they have to be involved in everything that's going on in the business, it hasn't scaled, it really doesn't have that much value. And it's a shock to a lot of businesses when they get to that point, because they think it's worth a lot. I was just looking at a particular smaller company here where I live now that they want to sell. And their idea of the valuation of their business and what it shows to the rest of us and the rest of the world on paper, it's huge gap. So they're going to have to come to reality with what they have. And I mean, I've been there in my own family business. We had a funeral home, and my mom got sick and we had to sell it. And you know what my parents thought it was worth and what we actually got out of it. Of course, we did have to sell pretty quickly, but nonetheless, there was that reality gap, I call it. So I think business owners really need to think about that.
Great. So I know it seems like I'm asking you the same question, but the part that I think people get hung up on is, at least, what I get hung up on. Okay. Where I get hung up is, what do I want to ask? What's the difference between making decisions for the business that you intend to have and that one small change? Because I think where people get not stuck, sidetracked perhaps, is when you're like mission creep. Who has not had mission creep? So I guess maybe that's my question. How does the 1% edge or one small thing that you can do fit inside? How do you keep yourself from going way off track, I guess, is my question.
So I think that the process that I created, first of all, your vision of where your company is going is going to evolve. It's naturally going to evolve as markets change, and even, legislation can change in industry. So it's going to constantly be evolving, but you've got to know whether or not, you want it to grow, whether you want it to become a big organization, or whether you just want a lifestyle business. And, there's no right answer, but you need to understand the difference. But the 1% changes along the way mean that you're constantly tweaking what you're doing. So you're not getting stuck in a mode. This is what happens. We get stuck in a mode of business operations, and this is the way we do it, and of course it's not going to work that way. We've never done it that way. Hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I say, if it ain't broke, start fixing it now anyway, because it will be broken tomorrow. So that's kind of my mantra, and that's how fast things are changing. So that's why the 1% constant tweaks. I was talking to somebody earlier this week, and he said, you need something like a great way to kind of differentiate yourself. He said, I've got it. He said, you're the rot girl. I said, what? He said, rot, R-O-T. And I'm like, all right, I think I'm rotten. What's that? He said, no, return on tweaks. Business owners get return on those tweaks. And I thought that was kind of cute.
I think that's maybe the next book title.
There you go. The Rot Girl says.
So as we jump into the questions, why don't we talk a little bit about, the question on Twitter is going to be here, can small changes result in, big impact? What do you say about that?
I think they definitely can. I think that by constantly innovative in every area of your business, as your product and service evolves, you've got to have that support structure to actually promote it and make sure it's successful. Here's the thing. If you come up with a great new way to deliver a product or service, and it has, as I said earlier, that noticeable difference, and you know that you're going to give the marketplace a reason to change its buying habits, that's all well and good. But If you don't have the right people on your team who see the vision, who are excited about this, who, want to move the ball forward, guess what? You're not going to be successful. If you don't have the right technology and systems in place, guess what? You're not going to be successful. If you don't understand how to read and really drill down to that real-time financial data and look at your financial dashboards on a regular basis, you're not going to be successful. And and marketing, the same thing. You're a great marketer, but if you're marketing the same way that you've always marketed, as fast as the whole landscape for marketing changes today, you're going to miss opportunities. And even with your customer base, are you focused on the right customer base? Is it the right profitability? But, are your profit margins slipping? If so, why? How can you tweak things that maybe be more productive with the way you deliver that product or service in order to increase your profit margins? So, those are all things we have to look at, and it's a lot. But if you do it on a regular basis, you don't sit down, once a year and go, oh, let's have this big plan. What are we going to do? Those strategic plans, those 5-year plans, that's history. And if you just look what happened right now with Amazon purchasing Whole Foods, right? I mean, who would have thought the online e-commerce king would purchase a brick and mortar location? And here Target had a strategic plan to get into the food business, to compete on a level with the Walmarts and things like that. And guess what? You know what? I think those people, I don't know, but I would think the leadership's scrambling right now to figure out, okay, now what's our plan going to be?
Well, so I had to write, so if you ever see me glance away, it's because I had a thought that I didn't want to lose.
Oh, that's all right.
So you actually started answering this question of mine. So if you're always looking for tweaks, what kinds of questions should you be asking yourself daily to find like the right places to tweak?
So,
do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah, the first step in my process is what I call mindful thinking or mindful reflection. And that is getting away from everything that you're doing, and I mean everything, and sitting back with yourself or with your team and just start saying, okay, if we weren't doing business this way today, would we continue doing it this way? If so, why? If not, why? What's competition out there that we don't really see? I mean, there's a competition we all know right now, but you think the taxi service ever thought Uber was going to be a competitor? So what little things are percolating on the horizon that could change the nature of our competitive landscape? You got to look at, your customers. Are the demographics changing? Are their needs and wants and desires changing? You look at the millennials. If you've been in business for a while, this is changing your whole game plan right now with the millennials coming along. What about your team? You have the right people in the right chairs, who are innovative, who are self-starters, who are willing to take a risk. Are you, as a leader, empowering them? Or are you one who, still has to have control of the change? But have you given people the right to speak up? And, if something doesn't work out and it, quote, fails, is that a bad thing? No, you learn from it and you go on. Is that the company culture you're creating? Are you looking at your financials from a historical basis, let's say on a monthly basis, or are you looking at them with a real-time daily dashboard and drilling down enough to really see what's happening? Because there's a real story that's being told in your financials. Are you leveraging the right marketing tools to reach your market? I mean, I personally, we were talking about this earlier, but I really like Facebook, but, the younger people like Facebook's for my grandmother, so I was talking to some young people just yesterday. I'm like, okay, Snapchat, I just don't get it. I'm sorry. And that's all they do is Snapchat. So, you've got to stay up with the times. You got to be constant learning. And so those are the kinds of introspective, and there can't be anything like no dumb ideas, right? And no sacred cows. No egos left at the door. And that's the kind of reflectiveness you need to do.
Oh, that's such great advice. So now, and I don't mean to put you on the spot with this, if you don't want to talk about yourself, maybe you can talk about.
Oh, I love to talk about myself.
Great. But can you think of one small change that you've made, a 1% edge change that's just changed everything for you?
I think one thing I did was, as I started at this evolution of looking at just a noticeable difference, which was just for my market of small businesses, I realized that there was a broader audience for this, and that this is something that I could take to every organization. It's actually more beneficial for smaller and mid-sized organizations because they're more agile. I've worked in corporate America. I know the bureaucracy, but even if one department could begin to implement this strategy and show how it works, you could build from there. So I think that's one minor change. It really wasn't so dramatic, just a noticeable difference, 1% edge, but it was enough of a switch of a transformation that took me to a different place. I think the other thing is that I have been more reliant on big customers. So myself, so I've been a B2B business. I've been focused on getting sponsors from the big brands and things like that. And I realized that I was constantly chasing and killing what I eat every day. So I've been changing. I've not that I don't still do that, but I'm building now this incremental platform of followers who now I can speak directly to the marketplace instead of waiting for sponsors to bring me in. So that's been, you watch the shift in what's happening with the digital transformation. So that's kind of what I've been following with that too.
Well, that's good. I think it gives us all, and that's the other thing I really like about this topic is this, it's something all of us can do, whether you are on your own or whether you're a giant corporation, anyone can make like one small change.
Right, exactly.
And I think this mindful thinking is probably the biggest thing, to maybe challenge yourself, right? Sometimes my favorite question is, what is it that I said will never happen?
Yeah. I sort of lost you there, Ivana.
I know you're okay. There we go.
Okay,
Why
good.
do you think that we are so averse to change? What is it about even small changes that just scare us?
Yeah, it's human nature not to like change. We get in our comfort zone and it's easy to stay there. And I think there is the fear of the unknown, or the sense of what if I fail? What if it doesn't work out? We really need to get over that, because at this day and age, and let me tell you a funny story. About 30 years ago, I was invited back to my high school to make the commencement address. And I had read a book written by, she was a well-known futurist at the time, Faith Popcorn. And she was talking about how people would work virtually. She called it the sense of cocooning. So we'd be more working from our homes. We'd have deliveries made to our homes. There'd be a lot of crime on the street, so people didn't feel safe. Even our social interactions would be virtual. And it seemed so far-fetched at the time. But look at what has happened now. So I told the kids back then, I said, there's really no blueprint for you to follow anymore. And that's what, we're taught linear education. We're taught to read something, memorize it, and, replay it, right? In this new world, you've got to, I don't even want to use the term think outside the box. I want to say there is no box to think in. So you have to really be creative, innovative, and look at the world from all new perspectives. Stand on your head, turn around, do some backflips. I don't know. A lot of the people that I've interviewed who are very, very innovative are also, they have a zest for adventure, and they'll climb mountains, and they'll, go through jungles, and they whitewater, rafting, and all these really adrenaline building adventures. And I ask them, does this give you new ideas, new perspectives? And they're like, yeah, everything you do like that. It changes your viewpoint of the world, gives you something new to think about in your business, and makes your mind more creative. For me, I try to read a lot of different things. So, from the news to business books to mystery novels, I even pick up magazines that I really have no interest in, like sports and Motor Trend or whatever, just to see what people are saying. And I don't know if you remember Working Girl with Melanie Griffith, and she gets caught impersonating her boss. And she had this great idea for this merger acquisition thing, and she gets booted. I think it was Sigourney Weaver, comes back in, and she's going to put the deal together and save the day. And one of the big shots says, ask her, Sigourney Weaver, where'd you get this idea? And she was like, oh, well, no, I don't remember. I'd have to check my notes. And so then he said to Melanie Griffith, where'd you get it? And she took out a couple of scraps, pieces of paper. One was from a society column. One was from another magazine. She's like, I was reading this and I was reading that, and I put two and two together. She said, you never know where the big ideas are going to come from. And it's very true.
It is. It is. And, it speaks to one of the things. Remember, I told you Charles is our big reader.
Yeah.
And he says on the chat, I think we were asked, it was about what is one small change you'd like to make for yourself? And he says, I still have a long way to go, but changing how I view myself changes how
I lost you.
I communicate about myself.
I think that's a great point. Absolutely. I think that, it's something else that we all kind of get stuck in a rut of how we view ourselves. But whether it's our own personal growth or whether it's the growth of your business, I use this analogy. I'm sure we all know people who on their bio picture, it still looks like their high school graduation picture, and then you see them and you're going, whoa. We are who we are, but we have to evolve. And if you're using stodgy old materials or things that were dated back in the 90s, you're going to lose some benefits in the marketplace, definitely. And that's true about ourselves. If we're not constantly updating ourselves, constantly learning, trying to enhance ourselves as human beings, then we're going to be going the other way.
And I really like what Natasha Rall says, because I think that there's unity in this. She says, appreciating whatever happens is tricky.
Yes.
But when you can find the good in every situation, you found success. So I think, how they say it's not what happens to you, it's that it happens for you. So when something bad happens, maybe a customer has a quality problem, maybe something went terribly wrong.
Right.
There could be a tweak opportunity there.
There could, what was the breakdown in your process? Was there a breakdown in, the way it was produced or delivered? Or, you can learn a lot from that and prevent it from ever happening again and actually improve your overall service going forward.
Exactly. I had a story that's similar. I worked for a very large company and we sold like pharmaceutical widgets, right? I'm not going to get into that. But billions and billions of these little tiny things. And so customers would call and they would place their order and you got to wait 6 weeks to get 1 million, 10 million of these little widgets, right?
Right.
And then we started getting calls from people who were requesting 5, 10, 20 of these units. And we're like, who are these people? And why do they need 20? And when we found out that they were up and coming pharmaceutical companies, biotech companies, right? And then we were like, oh, that's so exciting. And we created a process just for them.
Yeah. So
it's like looking for those little anomalies and not jumping to we don't do that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, no, that's not exactly. You've got to seize the opportunities. I talk to people about the window of opportunity. And I think a lot of times we overthink things and we get paralyzed by fear and we need to do a little more research. I'm not saying you jump, I'm not saying shoot from the hip, but you've got to run with it and tweak it as you go and learn from the process. Sam Walton used to always say, try it, do it, fix it. And I mean, that's just perfect. I mean, it's what we need to all be doing.
And maybe the shift that we need to make as small business owners in our thinking, maybe is not to take everything so seriously and make it so significant. Maybe if you viewed it out of curiosity or a game or maybe like a little scientific professor experiment, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes folks look at it and they think everything is like this major thing, but I love that Sam Walton quote.
Yeah. Right? Well, I think anytime you hear the word failure, none of us likes that, right? I mean, let's face it, it's no fun to fail. But Bill Gates refers to failure as research. So, I mean, I think I've certainly had failures, and believe me, I have learned much more. You know, I had one that happened to me years and years and years ago, and I called it my very expensive MBA program because I learned so much of what not to do. I can tell you that much.
Exactly. So the other thing that we could talk about is this idea of the dangers of making some of these changes. Because we just said, you know, we're walking this fine line. Don't shoot from the hip, but try it. Right? And don't overanalyze, but, you know, so.
Get as you go, yeah.
Right? So maybe what is the wrong way to make tweaks?
Well, I think that sometimes what happens is, especially as a founder or CEO or entrepreneur, these ideas percolate to the top and they become the flavor of the month. And so everybody, it's a rah, this is what we're going to do. Boy, oh boy, we're going to, you know, get this going. And then suddenly the wind shifts a little bit and that sort of gets dropped. And then something else comes along. So I think as the leader, one of the biggest mistakes you can make is once you make a commitment to something, you have to stand behind it until proven to the point that no, this isn't working, or no, we need to tweak it. And then you bring your team in, you're like, oh, what other opportunities do we see to go and grow? So I think that's huge. I also think it's important as a leader to make sure everybody's on board. You know, you can't go out and expect to make change and have everybody walk away and go, well, that makes no sense, but whatever, you know. And I think that's crucial, but I do see that happening a lot. And here's what I've learned about millennials, and this is from research, is millennials have a different work style and perspective than those of us in the baby boomer generation. They also bring something to the table, which maybe my generation certainly didn't do, and that is they're willing to ask why. They want to know why. They want to understand the purpose. And if you take offense to answering those questions, then shame on you, because those are very good questions to answer. I mean, everything that we do in business should have a purpose to serve. That's how you do well. Is if it's not servicing your marketplace, then why are you doing it? You know, just throwing it out there for the sake of throwing it out there and then trying to tell somebody, oh, you really need to buy this when you have no idea whether they do or not, you know, that's a disservice to the marketplace. So I think some of the questions that they bring to the table are very beneficial.
So how can you enroll your team members or even maybe your customers in coming up with looking for tweaks or, you know, finding these opportunities?
So, you know, Steve Jobs said, you can't ask your customers what they want, you have to show them. But I think that, you know, and by that, I'm sure he didn't mean, you know, you throw it out there and try to convince them that this is what they want. But as a business leader, if you listen to the marketplace, listening is key. So whether it's social listening, you know, joining discussion groups, you know, participating. But the big thing is always asking those open-ended questions, trying to understand where are the pain points, what's missing, what could be done better to serve this marketplace. I also think that there are a lot of times where an existing product or service actually can transition maybe even into a new market space with minor tweaks. So it's still your core competency, but you deliver it to a new type of customer just by making certain tweaks to accommodate that particular market. And that's the same thing you look at, you know, through what you're hearing is socially from what people are saying, asking those open-ended questions. You know, the yes and no answers, the satisfaction surveys, oh, those are all well and good. You know, use those for your marketing, whatever. But to really develop your product and your service and your business, you've got to really be a true listener. And, you know, it's interesting. I also read a great book recently just on listening. And it's amazing how bad of listeners we've become. So, you know, people, and if you think about it, you know, I do it myself. Somebody's saying something and you're already thinking about what your answer is going to be before instead of, like, let's say somebody said, oh, and that was a huge disaster. We're like, oh, wow, that's too bad, blah, 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 blah. Instead of saying, really, now, when you say huge, what does that mean? And when you say disaster, can you explain to me how that, and I mean, you can get so much more information to work with simply by listening and asking questions instead of just jumping or texting or whatever else, thinking about the next thing you have to do.
Okay, so if you've been looking at these changes that you're going to make, I guess my question is, are you always looking for changes, or are you looking at having something become a habit?
Well, that's kind of two of the same thing. So the process that I created is 6 steps. And so you start with step 1, and then at step 6 is to repeat from the beginning. So it's, there's a lot of, there have been a lot of things over the years. You said you worked in the corporate world. You may have been familiar with total quality management. That was a big thing, right? And I remember going through this whole exercise and all the diagrams up on the wall and all this. And then, 6 months later, nobody was talking about it anymore. The 1% edge process really needs to be just part of your daily, your regular business operations. So yes, it's constant, but it's also should become a habit. It should just become a mode of operations in your business.
So you've mentioned this step thing multiple times, which was mindfulness. Why don't you take us through real quick through the 6 steps?
Okay, so the first step is the reflection, the mindful thinking. So that's where you get away and you start asking all the questions. You start identifying competitive risk, opportunities, new technologies, all these kind of new market segments, and you start writing them down. And what I recommend is, as a second step then, is to begin to look at those things and start prioritizing them. And you said it earlier, you can't do everything and you don't want to get off track, right? So if something is a huge departure from your core competencies, that's something you want to put way down at the bottom of the pile. So you look at the ones that are the simplest to change initially, or maybe provide the greatest opportunity and potential. And then you draw a line. So I always put like the first 5 and draw a line. And that's what you're going to focus on. But the second step, or the third step then, is what I call cutting the dead weight. Because if you're going to focus on these things, you've got to also know what's dragging the company down. And can I focus on these things with the existing personnel, the existing technology? Are there products or services that just aren't profitable anymore that I need to X off or, push out of the way a little bit so we can focus on these? So you do that analysis, and then you create your plan of action and execute. And then you have regular weekly, or certainly at least, every other week meetings, and you start reviewing. In your plan of action, you want to put down your assumptions so that you have something to go by, like, why were we thinking this? So, and then you review and you analyze what's happening. Were assumptions just way off base? Is it producing the results we thought it was? Do we need to tweak it a little bit more? Do we need to adjust this or that? Or do we need to abandon some of this? In which case, then is there something below that line that now shows us that it's better opportunity above the line? And those are the adjustments you make. And then, like I said, you go to number 6 and you start at the beginning again. So, I think that's that process, and that's got to be regular, constant, and almost in real time, because that's the way the markets, the business world is moving today.
And I think that answers the question we're going to be talking about next. What will create those 10x changes that the code schedule guys were talking about? Because if you are doing the critical thinking and you're killing, I love this idea of, what are things we should be doing? What are things we should stop doing? Because not everybody's right. That doesn't work.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
clearly doesn't.
Yeah.
So now let me ask: once we the process, how do you know when to stop tweaking?
You can't stop tweaking. No, once you stop tweaking and you stand still, you're going the wrong direction. So, because the world is passing you by. You know, there was a line in Alice in Wonderland years ago, I'm paraphrasing, but it said something like, you know, sometimes you have to, seems like you have to run twice as fast just to stay in the same place. You know, that's kind of what I feel like today. We're running twice as fast as we ever have, and we're barely, you know, staying in the same place. So that's why you've got to constantly be in this forward momentum. The status quo just simply isn't acceptable anymore. But I also think that companies that are looking to build this kind of innovation in, you know, one of the biggest mistakes they can make is change for change's sake. So they just start, well, oh, there's an opportunity. Okay, let's go grab that one, or let's go do this. You know, it's got to make sense. It's got, once again, it's got to be thoughtful and prioritized and measured. So I think that's important. I think the same thing goes for technology. You know, implementing technology for technology's sake, and then you get it in there and your employees go, oh, this is too complicated, or you don't invest in the training, or it doesn't go with some other process you're using. You've wasted your time and energy, and you're hurting your productivity. So those issues are important to consider when you're doing, you know, for larger companies, I've seen businesses that had growth goals, and people just went out and acquired companies that made no sense whatsoever to fit with the existing organization. And eventually it's self-destructive, everything implodes. So, you know, you've got to really make thoughtful assumptions and understand why, once again, the why you're doing what you're doing and why it makes sense.
So I've noticed something, and I would love your take on this. I don't even know if it's slightly off topic, but you've referenced it a couple times. Think about what's missing for your customer. Think about what matters to your customer. These are all things that you've said. What do you say to folks who have started their business, I would say from an opportunistic standpoint? They saw a trend, right? And they jumped on that trend. Right? So they're not necessarily passionate about the customer. They're not necessarily passionate about their product or their service. What they are passionate is about the opportunity inside this market.
Right. Well, you know, I think, you know, you see an opportunity, but I'll give you a person. What you want to avoid is the fads, right, that aren't sustainable. So when I look at a company, whether it's to their business plan or to make an investment, or someone comes and talks to me and wants my advice, I look at the sustainability. So right now I'm looking at a business opportunity in the fitness area. It's a very proven, the demographics great. It's a proven program, you know, and it's medically proven, and I really am interested in it. But then I go to spinning class sometimes, and I see these new spinning places, you know, there's Cycle Bar and Soul Cycle and all these places, and they're popping up everywhere. Well, how long is a spinning fad going to last? And then somebody else, we're going to move on to something else, you know, whether it's it's constantly something that's changing in that industry. So, you know, is this sustainable? And is it just going to be something that's going to be a flash in the pan? That's what you got to be careful about.
I agree. And I think, what kind of advice would you give to a small business owner who, let's say, wants to connect more with their, but again, they maybe just aren't really strong at relationships? What's one small change they make?
One small change I think they could make is just picking up the phone once in a while and, you know, saying, hi, how are things going? Not that you're trying to sell anything. Just say hi, just checking in with you. How's life treating you? How's work going? If you know them fairly well, how's your family? Got any plans for the summer? If you know they have kids, your kids going anywhere to camp, just chit-chatty. If you're into sports, you know, hey, what about those Red Sox? Or I don't know. I know nothing about sports. But, you know, I mean, just some kind of a connection. And I think that says to people, hey, they care enough about me. This wasn't just a sales call. It's not about business. It wasn't chit chat before a meeting. This was just they're saying, hey, I just wanted to say hello and keep in touch. Or, you know, if you have time, you know, go grab coffee or, a bite of lunch. And I'm probably the world's worst about that because I get stuck in my office, but do as I say, not as I do. It really is a great rapport builder if you can get out there and do that. But, also I think, sharing things on social media, like if somebody puts out there, one of your customers says, oh, we're really proud to say that we won our local chamber award for best business, give them an accolade, share that, say, very proud of you, well deserved. I mean, people notice those things.
Yeah, and I think these days, especially because I work with a lot of companies who are, let's say, technology companies where the folks are more analytical. They don't feel comfortable.
Right.
And I think social media, whether it's LinkedIn or even Twitter or whatever, is a safe space because you're just not imposing on someone. It's just
right.
To make that connection.
Well, and you cannot replace the handwritten note. Taking time just to get some note cards, have them in your desk, jot off a little something. Hey, saw you won the chamber award. Very happy for you. Much continued success. Hope to see you soon. Yeah, Susan. Because that takes a little more time and effort than an email or a tweet or something. So I think that's good. But I tell you about the Twitter. I was in Washington D.C. and I've been tweeting for a long time, as have you. And I actually was getting ready to speak at an event, and I was at a breakfast table getting some coffee and something, and most people had already gone in the room. And this lady comes over to me, and she's like, "Hi, Susan." And I said, "Oh, good morning." And she said, "Oh, how are your dogs?" Because, I'm a big dog lover. And, "Oh, how's the new book coming along?" And, she's asking me all these questions. I'm like, okay. And finally I said, I haven't had this first cup of coffee yet, and I just can't put a name with your face. I said, "Could you help me out here?" And she gave me a hug. She said, "Oh, sweetie, you don't know me. I just follow you on Twitter." So, but she felt like she had a relationship with me.
I think that is so wonderful. And I do want to say too, as someone that's known you for a while, I think it's really important. You do this so well. You are such a great example of someone who is, whether like an author, a public figure, folks that people follow on Twitter, and so approachable. So it is important to be your brand on and off the screen, so to speak.
Oh, I totally agree. I, having been in the media for a while, I know some people that I dealt with that if someone had walked up to them and talked to them or something like, they would have been insulted and angry. And, my viewpoint always was not that I was ever like big famous like they were, but still they wouldn't have been there if it hadn't been for that person who really wanted to watch them or listen to them or read their books. And so, you got to be thankful. They're your bread and butter.
Absolutely. So Susan, with all this experience that you've had, what is something that you know for sure that you want to share with our watchers and listeners?
I think the one thing I know for sure is there's a huge amount of opportunity out there for everybody. And I hate it when people say to me, "Oh, you just can't make it anymore, and this generation isn't going to do it, and it's too hard," and on and on. I think that every generation's had their hardships, and I think there's a lot of great opportunity out there. I think that it just depends on how hard you want to work. And nobody ever said it was going to be easy. Nobody said you're not going to fall down and bloody up your knees a few times, but it's there. I think it's important to build your network. I think it's always important to give first before you ask back. It's not about going to people, and I'm sure you've had this happen too. People come up to me and they say, "Will you help me with this? Help me promote that?" And I don't even know them. So, I mean, I understand why they do it, but that's not how you build it. That's not how you build trust and get your brand out there. And I think that's important for everybody to remember. But I also believe that, your wealth is built on your network and your willingness to work hard. And if you got those two things lined up, you can make it happen.
Oh, I have to tweet. That's a tweetable.
Was that a good quote?
That was awesome. So awesome that I'm going to put it in there for you. Sometimes I'm a fast tweeter. Sometimes not so much.
It's kind of hard when you're talking and tweeting, right?
It's really hard sometimes. And it's like you said, it's hard to have your attention in two places at the same.
Right.
But we have had
Certainly.
such a lovely discussion here. Susan, take the last few minutes and talk about your book. Talk about maybe what it is that folks will love about the book, what's inside the book, because it is not quite out yet. So why should we get it?
Well, so if you can pre-order it on Amazon, you can also go to susonsolovic.com/new book, and you can sign up, get alerts, little tidbits, success tips and things, little sneak peeks of the book prior to its release. Love to have you there. There's also, if you go to my website, I have a free newsletter that you can sign up for, and when you do, you get a free ebook on smart marketing strategies for small business. Yes, and the book is, I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be fun. I think it's already getting a lot of interest, and so I really encourage everybody to check it out. And of course, pre-order it on Amazon would be wonderful too.
That's awesome. Chatting with us today. It was such great fun. I'm going to give you a few minutes if you want to check through the stream and see if you want to chime in with any of the folks, because it has been a lively conversation out there. Oh,
that's great. That's wonderful.
Awesome. All right. That was great. Thank you. Let me end. All right. So there you have another fun show. We're going to jump back into Twitter and take a look at what's going on there. Want to thank our lovely guest, Susan Solovic. There she is. Thank you, Susan, for being with us today, and join us every Monday, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific for Bizapalooza Chat Plugged In. Catch you out there on Twitter.